After a tough matchup in their Big Ten opener last weekend, Hoosiers have a far more favorable one, looking to get their first conference win of the season tonight.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, guys? You know the drill. It's another episode of Locked On Hoosiers, your one and only daily one-stop shop for everything IU athletics. I'm your host, as always, Jacob Rude. I want to thank you for making us your first listen this Wednesday, every single day of the week. I want to thank LinkedIn Jobs because they help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. IU had a tough game, obviously, against Rutgers. That's gone. That's in the past. Miller Kopp spoke to reporters on Tuesday, basically gave that sentiment. The Rutgers game is in the past. We can't change it. Let's move on from it. Let's learn from it because there's another Big Ten game tonight. Like I said, a far more favorable one that hopefully will set up Indiana nicely going into probably two of their toughest games of the season. Hoosiers will host Nebraska. Tip-off slated for 8:30 p.m. in Assembly Hall. It'll be on Big Ten Network. This is a series that the Hoosiers have dominated since Nebraska joined the Big Ten. They are 12-6 overall. Indiana is against Nebraska. Dominated might be a little harsh. They're 10-6 since Nebraska joined the Big Ten, but they've won the last 6 games. So in recent history, dominated is not too harsh. Last year, they played them twice. First meeting came at home. IU won by 13. That was a game that Trayce had 14, Race had 11 and 11. Tamar Bates had 13 points, probably his best game of the season last year. It'd be nice if he did that again tonight. But that was ugly win. A lot of the wins last season were ugly. If I recall correctly, that was a game IU led pretty big, and 13 was a generous scoreline towards Nebraska. They also beat them on the road, which is a rare feat for Indiana last season. Trayce had 23 and 12. Race had 12 and 7. Jordan Geronimo had 10 and 8. So IU won both those games last season. They have not lost to Nebraska since January 14th of 2019. That was a 25th ranked Indiana team getting whooped by Nebraska by 15 points. But like I said, since then, IU has won home and away. They beat them in the Big Ten tournament in 2020 as well. Beat them handily. And you know how hard it is for IU to win a Big Ten tournament game. So beat them by 25 points in that one. But ultimately a series that while Nebraska gave Indiana some good contests and won their fair share of games when they first joined the conference, Indiana is controlling this series now. Ideally, and kind of based on the projections, IU will continue controlling the series tonight. Ken Palm has them as a 12-point favorite, 72-60, the projected score, with an 87% win probability. Bet Online is even more generous, has IU favored by 13 points, an over-under of 137.5, which Ken Palm would be the under, however much you would have put into that. That feels like about right where I would put things, at 12 to 13 point mark. I don't know that I would have much betting advice on this one. We'll talk about Bet Online here in a bit, but if it'd be anything, it might be a bounce back game from Trayce or A big night from one of the role players. Role players typically play better at home versus on the road. This is a Nebraska team that doesn't have a ton of size, and they struggle to get any blocks, basically, defend the interior particularly well. They have a couple of tall guys, but they're young. They have a 7-footer, a 6'11 player, and a 6'10 player, but they're a freshman and 2 sophomores. So you would think Trayce's experience would help there. Their tallest player that kind of plays active minutes is Derrick Walker, who we're going to mention. He is their best player at 6'8", a forward. Trayce is going to have a nice little matchup there, but if you're wanting to bet on anything, I would look at some player props for Trayce in a potential bounce back game from him. But let's dive into this Nebraska team a little more in depth. Get a look at their KenPom stats and their raw numbers through this season. Before we do that, let's talk about today's sponsor, LinkedIn. Shout out to them. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high stakes wager for small businesses. You want to be 100% certain that you have the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. It's simple. You guys have heard me mention it before. You just post your job using that link we gave, or we said. You add it to kind of, your network so people can see it. They have tools that basically are screening questions to filter through applicants so that you aren't wasting your time, basically interviewing people that might not be the right fit. That's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number one in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks for making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen today, every single day. For your second listen today, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, or wherever you guys get podcasts at. Let's take a look at Nebraska. KenPom has them rated as the 83rd team in the nation, which is still the fourth hardest opponent Indiana has faced because of that one-way high variance non-conference schedule, we'll say. Nebraska, though, is a team that will enter this game at 6-3 with losses to St. John's, ranked 44th, Oklahoma ranked 32nd, Memphis ranked 29th. For reference, IU's ranked 10th. Now, that being said, Nebraska is coming off a win against number 21 Creighton on the road, a very impressive win by them. When I say number one, that's KenPom rating. So a very good Creighton team that Nebraska just beat. The rest of their wins are fairly easy, relatively speaking, easy games, though they beat Florida State and Boston College, albeit two teams that are struggling in the ACC this year. So Nebraska maybe not quite the pushover they were at times during that kind of 6-game winning streak Indiana had, but still a team that is going to be toward the bottom of the Big Ten this season. They are right now by KenPom projected to be projected to finish 7-13, which is the second worst record in the Big Ten. Only Minnesota is worse. So gives you a sense of where they fall in this hierarchy. If you look at some of their kind of efficiency numbers, they're very average, slightly above average, 104th in offense, 74th in defense and adjusted efficiency, 291st in adjusted tempo. They're going to play slow. I don't know that tempo really changes a whole lot for Indiana this season. They can play fast. They can play slow. Biggest strengths, they don't send people to the foul line. They're third in the country in opponent free throw attempted per field goal attempted. So they aren't putting guys on the line. We'll see if that's the case tonight with Trayce and Race and Malik on the interior and Xavier and hopefully Jalen Hood-Schifino getting to the rim. We'll see if they can defend without fouling, something Indiana certainly is not doing a great deal of. Outside of that, opponents aren't shooting free throws well against them, which that's completely luck. But Indiana isn't a good free throw shooting team, so maybe they'll continue that. Bizarrely, opponents are shooting 59.3% against them from the free throw line, which is a crazy low number. Now, that being said, that's barely ahead of what Nebraska is shooting, 62.2% as a team. So free throws are going to be ugly tonight, most likely. And then they shoot decently from 2-point land, 43rd in the country. They shoot 55%. They shoot 32% from three, though. So what you're looking at is a team that they're 55th in offensive rebounding. They can score inside the interior, but that's about it. They're not going to score at the free throw line. They get shots blocked a lot. They turn the ball over a fair amount. It's just a team that has not been great this season. They're not fast. They're just a very average offense that doesn't really have a whole lot of, at least on paper, threatening parts to it. Now, if you look at some of the individuals, we mentioned Derrick Walker is presumably the guy that might draw a fair amount of matchup against Trayce. What Indiana has done in the past is put Race on some of these matchups, so I wouldn't be surprised if he's the one that takes Derrick Walker to start. He's only played 4 games, though. And so someone who is, I don't want to say rusty, he's played the last 4 games, and he had 22 points in that win over Creighton, had 20 and 13 against Florida State. So someone that got a slow start to the year just by not being available, but he's available now, averaging 16.8 and 9.5. He's their top guy, their top scorer. And you have to take a lot of those stats with a grain of salt. If Derrick Walker wasn't there for the first 5 games of the season, the last 4 games were a loss to Memphis, win over Florida State, win over Boston College, win over Creighton. So maybe a lot of these stats aren't exactly they don't paint the whole picture of what this team is because Walker hasn't been available. He shoots 73% from the field. Those are Mackenzie Holmes numbers. He's not going to stretch the floor. He's only a 50% free throw shooter, but it's going to be an interesting matchup for Indiana. Like I said, he is listed at 6'8", 232 pounds, so I wouldn't be surprised if Race is the one that starts out on him. I think there are going to be a number of guys cycle through. This is one of those games where theoretically having as much depth as you do in the front court can just wear someone down because you have a lot more bodies than they do, and you can keep throwing guys out there on him, fresh guys out there to wear him down. Outside of him, Sam Grisel is averaging 11.3 points, 5.6 rebounds, 4.9 assists, shooting 50% from the field, but only 35% from three. Kisei Tominaga is their sharpshooter, 10 points per game, shooting 41.7% from three on 4 attempts per game. So he does a lot of the heavy lifting in that really bad 3-point shooting numbers we gave. He is responsible for a good chunk of their made 3-pointers, 15 of their 59. So about a little over 20% of their 25.4% of their makes from range are from him. So he's going to be on the scouting report. Absolutely. On paper, they have a number of guys who are averaging a lot of points, but that's going to change a little bit. Juwan Gary, CJ Wilcher, both were over 10 points. That obviously is taking into account the games that Walker played or did not play, excuse me. So if you look at that Creighton game, for example, Walker had 22, Grisel had 18 and 12. Gary had 12 points and 9 rebounds. Tominaga was 1 of 5 and didn't shoot a three-pointer. So that gives you maybe a different sense, a more accurate sense of what this team could look like with Walker healthy. That Boston College game, you're looking at Walker scoring 10. Tominaga scored 23 off the bench, 4 or 5 from 3. So he's not someone that starts, but he's someone that's going to come in and make an impact for this team. Nick Zeisloff-esque. So somebody to monitor. While Nebraska might be a bad three-point shooting team overall, he is not. So I'm sure he's going to be, like I said, on that scouting report. Overall, this is a game, though, Indiana should be winning, especially given the situation, the desire to bounce back and pick up a win heading into those games against Arizona and Kansas. It's going to be a tough stretch for Nebraska. They play at Indiana versus Purdue, and then Kansas State on a neutral court. Have fun with that. Those are 3 tough games, especially back-to-back Big Ten games against Indiana and Purdue. I don't know how many teams are going to do that this year. I cannot imagine a tougher back-to-back in the Big Ten than those 2 games. Excited for this one. Assembly Hall, Big Ten game. A late game seems to really amp up the environment. Let's win this one. Let's head into this back-to-back stretch against Arizona and Kansas with some momentum, some positive momentum. Now, we talked yesterday about the men's net rating that came out. The women's net ranking came out as well. Let's look at IU because, boy, you're going to struggle to find a team with a better resume so far than what the Hoosiers have. We'll talk about them in a moment, but first, BetOnline is your number one source for all your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. We mentioned if you're wanting a betting angle on this one, 13 feels a little high, even though I have a lot of faith in this IU team, and I think they match up well with Nebraska. It's hard to considering they just lost, it feels weird to say take IU minus 13. It's a lot of points. If I were leaning anywhere, I would probably lean in towards Indiana to cover, but I don't feel great on that line. Maybe monitor it, see if it comes down a little bit. To do that, you can head to the website or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. IU women's basketball team was named Team of the Week by the NCAA. This NCAA.com. It's just kind of an annual piece that they put out, not annual, weekly piece they put out, awarding a team of the week honors, and IU beating the brakes off of UNC and then coming back with that nice win against Illinois. That is about as good as anybody's going to get. So they got team of the week honors. They're number 5 in the NCAA.com power rankings. The polls were released this week. Indiana is number 4 in the AP poll, just marginally behind Ohio State for 3rd. South Carolina and Stanford are 1-2. But in the coaches poll, IU is number 3, their highest ranking ever for the program. Number 4 tied it. Number 3 is the highest ranking ever. They just flip-flopped with Ohio State in that one. So your number 3 ranked Indiana Hoosiers, based on the coaches poll, based on the net ranking, which we mentioned is something the tournament committee cares a lot about. Indiana is number 4. South Carolina is 1. Stanford is 2. UConn is 3. They're ranked 6th in both polls, but it's UConn and they've played a hell of a schedule. They are number 3, and your Hoosiers are number 4. We broke down a little bit the various LinkedIn got a lot of free advertising on the YouTube show today because I forgot to switch the nameplate. But we mentioned the breakdown for quad 1 wins are 1 through 30 at home, 1 through 50 on the road, 1 through 75, or 1 through 50 neutral, 1 through 75 on the road. IU is 4-0 for quad one games. They have 4 quad one wins. The UNC game, the Tennessee game, even as much as Tennessee has struggled, Tennessee is still a quad one win. They're 31st in the country right now. And then the Memphis game, which we didn't talk a ton about, that was a neutral site game. That is barely a quad one win right now, but it was neutral site at the Las Vegas Invite. Obviously, there were some other things we talked about from that. And then on Sunday, that game that IU snuck out against Illinois was a quad one win because Illinois is 20th in the net ranking. Boy, oh boy. If you look at Big Ten teams, Indiana is first, and then Michigan is at number 13. They're your next Big Ten team. Ohio State is 15th as your next Big Ten team. Iowa is 16th. Illinois is 20th. And then there's a bit of a drop-off to Nebraska, Michigan State, Purdue, Maryland, all the way down at 38th. Quite a drop-off for Maryland, considering how long that they dominated the Big Ten. Although it is early December and Maryland is still Maryland. I fully believe they're going to get things figured out just based off reputation, if nothing else. IU has a pair of quad 2 wins as well. Their other game in Las Vegas came against Auburn. 83rd Auburn is in the net ranking. So that is a quad 2 win. And then another quad 2 win, surprisingly, and borderline. I don't think it's going to get all the way up to a quad 1 win, but it's a very safe quad 2 win is against Bowling Green, which I don't know that anybody at the time thought that was a quad 2 win because IU beat the brakes off of them by 35. That was a quad 2 win. They come in at 54th. If considering it's a home game, top 60 is a quad 2 win, so I guess they could slip out a little bit. I don't know that it'll stay a quad 2 win. I had the numbers wrong on that, but for now, it's a quad 2 win, so a big one from Indiana there. So you can pretty much say for maybe like your South Carolina, perhaps your Stanford, you can put this resume up with anybody else so far, and it's going to match up and arguably be better than theirs. Stanford has played a pretty tough schedule. Honestly, just based purely on resume, IU probably has a better one than Stanford, just eyeballing it. Stanford has a win against Gonzaga and a loss against South Carolina. South Carolina is levels above everyone else. They beat Maryland. They beat Stanford. They beat UCLA. All those teams were ranked. They beat Memphis. Yeah, they're levels above everyone else. It's South Carolina and then the rest of the field. But the rest of the field, IU might be the best team in that bunch, and that's a good thing. That's this is a really, really good IU team, led by Mackenzie Holmes right now, who is playing as well as anybody in the country. Hopefully to be joined eventually sooner rather than later by Grace Berger. Thanks again, guys, for making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen every day. We'll be back with you tomorrow to recap the Nebraska game. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. Follow us on Twitter if you do not already. Subscribe to the podcast. Leave a rating and review. You guys know all of that stuff. Most importantly, though, guys, make sure you have a great Wednesday. Get through that hump day as best as you can. And as always, LEO.